The pristine streets of Meadowbrook Estates hid a simmering tension beneath the perfect veneer. Eleanor Harrington, known behind closed doors as the General, ruled the HOA with meticulous precision for 15 years. A former corporate compliance officer with no children of her own, Eleanor channeled her considerable energy into enforcing every bylaw with religious fervor. Residents learned to fear the sound of her stiletto heels clicking on sidewalks during her daily inspection walks. When the beloved previous HOA president died suddenly, Eleanor seized control through procedural maneuvers most residents couldn't understand, installing allies and systematically removing opposition. What residents didn't know was that Eleanor had leveraged her position to prevent an investigation into her questionable financial management of the community reserve funds, money that had mysteriously diminished under her watch. On a particularly warm Tuesday morning, Eleanor stood at her bay window, binoculars trained on Mrs. Patel's rose garden. 6 inches too high, she muttered, jotting notes in her leather-bound violation book. Her home, a meticulously renovated colonial with not a pillow out of place, served as her command center. The walls were adorned with framed recognition certificates from the National Association of Homeowners Associations, where she had twice been awarded excellence in community standards enforcement. Eleanor's phone chimed with a text from her most loyal ally, Roger Whitman, the retired accountant who served as HOA treasurer. Package delivery truck parked in front of the Thompson home for 18 minutes. Exceeds 15-minute commercial vehicle limit. She smiled thinly, adding another entry to her list. The Thompsons had dared to question her authority at the last board meeting, suggesting that perhaps the community garden could be expanded without board approval. Such insubordination required a response. Later that afternoon, Eleanor conducted her rounds, clipboard in hand, gold HOA president pin gleaming on her tailored blazer. She paused at the community pool, frowning at a discarded wrapper near the fence. Mr. Gonzalez, the pool maintenance technician, rushed to retrieve it before she could document the infraction. "Miss Harrington, good afternoon," he said, his voice tinged with nervous respect. "The new chemical balance system has been installed. It's fully automated now, just as you requested." Eleanor nodded curtly, and the access codes changed yesterday. Only board members have the master code, as specified in the new protocol you drafted. Excellent. She made a show of inspecting the equipment room, running a manicured finger along the shelves of chemicals. "I'll need complete documentation of all maintenance procedures. The annual audit is approaching." What Mr. Gonzalez didn't notice was Eleanor photographing the chemical storage layout with her phone, particularly the location of the acid containers used for pH balancing. Nor did he realize that when she tested the new electronic lock system, she was creating a log of when the security cameras recorded entries. As Eleanor walked home, she waved pleasantly to Mrs. Davis, who was hurriedly removing her trash bins from the curb, 15 minutes before the mandated time. Mrs. Davis waved back with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Inside the privacy of her home, Eleanor reviewed the HOA financial records on her personal laptop, records that differed subtly from those presented at monthly meetings. A separate account labeled Reserve Fund Management contained transfers that would raise questions if examined closely. She had become quite skilled at moving community funds through legitimate seeming channels, always with impeccable paperwork justifying each transaction as necessary for community improvements that somehow never quite materialized as described. As darkness fell over Meadowbrook Estates, lights clicked off precisely at 10 p.m., the unwritten but universally understood curfew. Eleanor stood at her window, surveying her domain with satisfaction. The neighborhood was quiet, orderly, and under control, just as she liked it. The Martinez family's arrival changed everything. Carlos, a charismatic civil rights attorney, and Lucia, a pediatric nurse, quickly became neighborhood favorites. Their pool gatherings attracted residents who had previously kept to themselves, creating new friendships across cultural and generational lines. Their oldest son, Miguel, a journalism major, started documenting Eleanor's selective enforcement of rules, strict with working families but lenient with her inner circle. When Eleanor issued the Martinez family their 5th violation notice for excessive community engagement, Carlos discovered that many of Eleanor's prized bylaws had never been properly ratified. At the heated July HOA meeting, he publicly challenged her authority, presenting evidence that she had been operating beyond her legal powers for years. Eleanor's face remained a mask, but those sitting nearby noticed her hands trembling with rage as the room erupted in applause for Carlos. The Martinez family had moved into the stately Tudor at 47 Oakwood Drive, coincidentally right across from Eleanor's house, on a sunny Saturday in April. The moving truck had barely departed when Eleanor appeared on their doorstep with a welcome basket containing a 78-page community handbook with certain passages highlighted in neon yellow. "I've taken the liberty of flagging the sections most commonly misunderstood by new residents," she explained with a tight smile. "I'm always watching out for our community standards. Carlos had accepted the basket with genuine warmth. "Thank you so much. We're excited to be part of the community. I hope you'll join us for a housewarming next weekend." Eleanor's expression flickered. "Just be sure to file the proper event notification form. Section 37B clearly states that gatherings exceeding 8 non-resident guests require board approval with 14 days' notice." Despite the chilly welcome, the Martinez family's natural warmth proved infectious. Their 3 children, Miguel, 19, Zoe, 12, and Rafael, 8, quickly befriended other neighborhood kids who had previously been discouraged from playing outdoors due to noise restrictions. Lucia started a weekend swimming program for seniors at the community pool, while Carlos organized an informal legal aid clinic in the clubhouse, helping residents with everything from immigration paperwork to tenant disputes. By mid-June, the social landscape of Meadowbrook had subtly shifted. The Martinez home became an unofficial community center, with neighbors dropping by unannounced, a practice previously unheard of in Eleanor's rigidly scheduled domain. Even more threatening to Eleanor's authority was the emergence of spontaneous gatherings at the pool without her prior approval. Miguel, home from college for the summer, noticed the growing tension. With his journalist's instinct, he began talking to neighbors, uncovering stories of Eleanor's disparate treatment based on arbitrary factors. The Johnsons, an elderly white couple on Eleanor's approved list, had been allowed to install a non-regulation garden fence, while the Kim family had received multiple violations for identical landscaping. Miguel started a digital archive, meticulously documenting these inconsistencies with photographs and resident testimonials. Eleanor escalated her campaign against the Martinez family. First came the citations: improper trash bin placement, unapproved wind chimes, excessive water usage during Rafael's birthday party water balloon fight. When these failed to dampen the family's spirits, she implemented new pool regulations requiring reservations 72 hours in advance for groups of 4 or more. "She's targeting us specifically," Lucia observed one evening examining the latest violation notice, this one claiming their garden hose was an unapproved color. Carlos had spent the night reviewing the HOA charter and bylaws, legal pad filled with notes. "This is fascinating," he said, showing Lucia a document timestamp. The pool usage restrictions she's citing, they were added last year without a proper quorum or resident notification. Legally speaking, they're unenforceable. The July HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse on a sweltering evening. Attendance was unusually high. Word had spread that Carlos planned to address governance concerns. Eleanor sat at the head table, gavel at the ready, Roger and 2 other board members flanking her like sentries. The morning of the community pool party dawned bright and hot. Eleanor watched from her home office as volunteers transformed the pool area. Her computer screen split between security camera feeds and an open email from the bank questioning certain HOA transactions. Her phone buzzed with a notification. An emergency board meeting had been called for Monday morning with one agenda item: review of presidential conduct. In her garage, Eleanor methodically transferred concentrated muriatic acid from clearly labeled containers into generic pool supply bottles. Her movements were precise, practiced from years of maintaining her own hot tub. She had calculated exactly how much would be needed to cause discomfort without permanent damage, just enough to ruin the party and demonstrate her indispensability when it came to pool maintenance. Sometimes people need to learn respect through consequences, she whispered to herself, checking her watch and noting when the pool service technician usually took his lunch break. The weekend following the contentious HOA meeting had been the longest of Eleanor's life. Her phone, usually busy with texts from board members seeking approval for mundane decisions, had fallen eerily silent. Roger, her most loyal ally, had been avoiding her calls since Friday when she'd suggested they take preemptive measures against the Martinez family. Even her daily neighborhood inspection walks had become uncomfortable, with residents who previously scurried indoors now making direct eye contact or, worse, engaging the Martinez family in animated conversation on front lawns. Saturday evening, she had received the email that shattered her composure. The bank's fraud department had questions about certain transfers from the HOA reserve fund to accounts Eleanor had labeled as vendor payments. The transfer amounts matched to the dollar deposits made to her personal offshore account in the Caymans. 15 years of service, she muttered, pacing her immaculate living room. 15 years keeping this neighborhood from descending into chaos and mediocrity. Her gaze fell on the Community Leader of the Year plaque from 2019. Next to it sat a framed photo of herself with the previous HOA president, Harold Tanaka, taken just weeks before his unexpected heart attack, the event that had allowed her ascension to power. What the photo didn't show was the heated argument they'd had moments before about financial irregularities Harold had discovered. As darkness fell, Eleanor watched the Martinez house through her blinds. Lights blazed as people came and went freely. Laughter floated across the street. They were planning tomorrow's community pool party, the first not organized by the official HOA Activities Committee. The final insult. At 3 a.m., Eleanor's phone chimed with a calendar notification. The emergency board meeting was now listed on the community portal. Monday, 9 a.m. The message from Roger was terse. Eleanor, given recent allegations, the board feels it necessary to review leadership structure. Please prepare to address financial discrepancies identified by Carlos Martinez. Something cold and calculating settled in Eleanor's mind. She opened her laptop and reviewed the security footage from the pool equipment room. The camera blind spots she had carefully mapped during her inspections were still there. The maintenance technician, Mr. Gonzalez, followed a predictable schedule. 12-year-old Zoe Martinez was the first to notice something wrong. Her eyes burned as she surfaced from underwater, and the skin on her arms tingled uncomfortably. Within minutes, children were scrambling out of the pool, some crying as angry red rashes developed on exposed skin. Carlos Martinez organized an evacuation to the clubhouse while his wife Lucia provided emergency medical assessment. Across the community, phones lit up with alarming text messages. Something wrong with the pool. Children having trouble breathing, calling 911. At the local hospital, Dr. Kendra Washington, who had recently moved to Meadowbrook herself, recognized the pattern of symptoms immediately. "This isn't bacterial contamination," she told the gathering crowd of concerned parents in the ER waiting room. "These are chemical burns." Outside the emergency room, news vans gathered as reporters picked up chatter on the police scanner about a mass casualty incident involving dozens of children. Miguel Martinez, putting his journalism training to use, began methodically interviewing affected families, collecting details that would eventually break the case wide open. The community pool had been open for just under 45 minutes when disaster struck. The day had started perfectly: blue skies, temperatures climbing toward 90 degrees, and the excited chatter of families who had been looking forward to the first community-organized event in years, not micromanaged by Eleanor. Carlos had set up a sound system playing gentle background music, while Lucia organized a potluck table under the shade of oak trees. Zoe Martinez had been playing Marco Polo with her brother Rafael and 4 other neighborhood children when she first felt the burning sensation. She surfaced, rubbing her eyes, confusion clouding her features. "Dad," she called out, voice uncertain. "Something feels weird." Carlos glanced up from where he was arranging chairs, noticing his daughter's distress. Before he could respond, 8-year-old Rafael emerged from the pool, coughing violently. "My throat hurts," he gasped, followed immediately by cries from other children. Mrs. Patel, watching from a lounge chair, suddenly stood up. "The water! Look at the water!" Around the pool's edges, a faint bluish tinge was becoming visible, spreading inward from the return jets. The chemical smell, previously masked by sunscreen and food aromas, suddenly became overwhelming. "Everyone out of the pool. Now!" Carlos shouted, his attorney's commanding courtroom voice cutting through the confused chatter. Parents rushed forward, pulling children from the water as Lucia's nursing instincts kicked in. "Rinse off immediately. Use the outdoor showers," she directed, already examining a sobbing 4-year-old whose chest was covered in angry red welts. Carlos called 911. "Tell them possible chemical exposure, multiple pediatric victims." Within minutes, the joyful gathering had transformed into a scene of controlled chaos. The Thompsons, both former military, established a trade area in the clubhouse. Lucia moved between affected children, her face grim as she assessed symptoms. Respiratory distress, skin irritation ranging from mild redness to blistering burns, eye inflammation, and in some cases, vomiting. Mr. Gonzalez, the pool maintenance technician, arrived running, alerted by multiple frantic calls. His face drained of color as he tested the water. "This is impossible," he whispered, staring at the test strip. "This is acid levels that would dissolve metal. The automatic safety systems should have prevented this." Across the community, residents not at the pool received the emergency alerts. Roger Whitman, still troubled by his earlier conversation with Eleanor, felt a chill of suspicion. He tried calling her again but received no answer. At Lakeside Medical Center, the emergency department scrambled to respond. Dr. Kendra Washington, head of emergency medicine and a Meadowbrook resident for just 3 months, activated the hospital's mass casualty protocol when the first ambulances radioed ahead. "Prepare the decontamination showers," she ordered. "I want respiratory therapy standing by and ophthalmology on call. Contact poison control with the following information. Suspected pool chemical exposure, multiple victims, primarily pediatric." Detective James Rivera had seen a lot in 20 years on the force, but the security footage made him physically ill. The cameras had caught Eleanor in the pool equipment room at 5:42 a.m. methodically emptying bottles into the filtration system and carefully wiping down surfaces before leaving. When officers arrived at her immaculate Tudor home, Eleanor greeted them in tennis whites, expression perfectly composed, until they mentioned the search warrant. "This is absurd," she sputtered, mask slipping momentarily. "I was trying to help. The pH levels were dangerously basic, But the evidence mounted quickly. Receipts for industrial-grade acid and deleted computer search history recovered by forensics revealing queries like how much muriatic acid is dangerous and how long before chemical burns appear. Most damning was the draft email found on her computer addressed to the HOA board prepared before the incident. Had proper procedures been followed and my authority respected, today's unfortunate pool incident could have been avoided. In the interrogation room, Detective Rivera watched Eleanor's carefully constructed facade crumble as she realized the severity of the charges. 27 counts of assault, child endangerment, and attempted manslaughter. Monday morning dawned with Meadowbrook Estates transformed. News vans lined the community entrance, reporters clutching microphones positioned strategically near the police tape surrounding the pool. Inside the security office adjacent to the clubhouse, Detective Rivera and his partner, Detective Sarah Chen, reviewed the security footage for the third time. Play it again, Rivera instructed the security system administrator, a nervous man named Peterson, who kept repeating that he'd only been hired 6 months ago. Focus on the equipment room entrance. The grainy footage showed the pool area at 5:30 a.m., dimly lit by security lights. At precisely 5:42 a.m., a figure in gardening clothes, wide-brimmed hat, and oversized sunglasses, obscuring most of their face, approached the equipment room. The figure punched in a code, disappeared inside for exactly 7 minutes, then emerged, carefully wiping the door handle with what appeared to be a cloth before departing along the maintenance path. "Can you enhance the image?" Detective Chen asked. Peterson shook his head. "This is as good as it gets. The system was deliberately downgraded last year. Budget cuts, they said." "Who authorized those cuts?" Rivera asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Ms. Harrington said the high-resolution cameras were an unnecessary expense." Miguel Martinez entered the security office, a folder tucked under his arm. "Detectives, I have something you should see." Inside the folder were printouts of Eleanor's schedule for the past month, highlighting a pattern of inspections of the pool facility, always during Mr. Gonzalez's lunch break. Most damning was a copy of the code change authorization form for the equipment room, signed by Eleanor just 3 weeks prior. "Where did you get these?" Detective Chen asked. "My father requested all HOA documents last week as part of his investigation into bylaw irregularities," Miguel explained. "These were included." Outside Eleanor's Tudor home, the scene was surreal. 2 police cruisers and an unmarked detective's vehicle were parked in the circular driveway. Neighbors watched from windows and porches. Officers in latex gloves carried evidence bags from her garage to a waiting van. Eleanor herself sat rigidly in her living room, dressed immaculately in tennis whites, her expression a study in controlled indignation as Detective Rivera presented the search warrant. "This is preposterous," she stated, voice clipped. "I was at the tennis courts all morning." "Ask anyone." "We did," Rivera replied, watching her carefully. "You were there from 8:15 to 9:30. The security footage shows someone entering the pool equipment room at 5:42 a.m. He placed a still image from the footage on the coffee table. "Someone wearing gardening clothes remarkably similar to those we just found in your hall closet." Eleanor's composure flickered momentarily. Many people garden in this community. The courthouse was packed to capacity for Eleanor's sentencing hearing 6 months later. Victim impact statements lasted for hours as residents detailed not just the physical injuries, 3 children still undergoing treatment for lung damage, but the psychological toll of betrayal by someone they had trusted to protect their community. When Eleanor finally spoke, her eyes were vacant, her justifications hollow. "I built this community," she insisted. "Everything I did was for Meadowbrook." The judge's voice cut through her delusions. 15 years. No possibility of parole for 10. As Eleanor was led away, Carlos Martinez announced the formation of the Meadowbrook Community Trust, funded by the $1.2 million recovered from Eleanor's accounts and a lawsuit settlement against the HOA insurance policy. The trust would cover ongoing medical expenses for victims and establish a new governance model based on transparency and shared responsibility. On the 1-year anniversary of what residents now call the incident, the community gathered for the reopening of the renovated pool. Miguel Martinez, now running a successful local news blog, captured the moment the first children cautiously entered the water, then broke into delighted splashing and play. The new sign at the pool entrance read simply, "Meadowbrook Pool, owned by all, governed by many, ruled by none." Meanwhile, Eleanor's stories spread across the internet, her mugshot becoming the face of a viral Reddit thread that spawned thousands of comments about entitlement, power, and the unexpected heroes who stand against it. 6 months after the pool incident, the residents of Meadowbrook Estates filed into courtroom 7B of the county courthouse. The trial had been relatively swift, the evidence overwhelming, Eleanor's own statements damning. Now came the sentencing hearing, and no one wanted to miss it. Rafael Martinez sat with his parents in the front row, a respiratory inhaler visible in his pocket. His lungs, the doctors had explained, might never fully recover from the chemical exposure. Behind him sat the Patel family, the Kim family, and dozens of other Meadowbrook residents, some still bearing faint scars from chemical burns. Judge Rosario Diaz, and of her no-nonsense approach, called the court to order. Before I announce sentencing, we'll hear victim impact statements. For the next 3 hours, residents approached the podium. Mrs. Patel spoke of her granddaughter's nightmares about the pool monster. Mr. Thompson described how his son now refused to go swimming anywhere. Dr. Washington detailed the ongoing medical treatments required for several children. When Lucia Martinez took the stand, a hush fell over the courtroom. As a nurse who treated many injuries, she began, voice steady. But I never expected to watch my own child struggle to breathe while chemical burns developed on his skin. Raphael still uses an inhaler. He still wakes up gasping for air. She looked directly at Eleanor. But the greatest injury wasn't physical. It was the betrayal. Someone we trusted to lead our community deliberately harmed our children to prove a point about her own importance. Throughout the statements, Eleanor sat motionless beside her attorney, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She had lost weight during her pre-trial detention, her designer clothes replaced by a conservative gray suit that hung loosely on her frame. Roger Whitman, who had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony about financial improprieties, watched from the back of the courtroom. The investigation into Harold Tanaka's death remained ongoing, though toxicology tests had recently raised questions about the natural causes determination. When all statements concluded, Judge Diaz turned to Eleanor. Ms. Harrington, do you wish to address the court before sentencing? Eleanor rose slowly, ignoring her attorney's concerned whisper. I dedicated 15 years to Meadowbrook Estates, she began, her voice lacking its former authoritative resonance. I built that community from nothing. Every property value increase, every beautification project, every improvement was because of my leadership. She paused, scanning the hostile faces before her. What happened at the pool was unfortunate. But had my authority been respected, had proper procedures been followed, none of it would have been necessary. Everything I did was for Meadowbrook.